But Cory Sandhagen, man, and I'm going to read directly from his Instagram page. If you didn't see the fight, split decision for Cory Sandhagen over Marlon Chito Vera, and that's another conversation. 50-45, 49-46, and then 47-48 from the third and dissenting judge. And I just want to lead with this from Cory, and then I'll open it up to you, Ken Flo. Mm-hmm. This one felt like I was surfing on the clouds, all energies in me working together, moving in one direction. I was watching myself decide and could sense danger like it was heat, so awake to it all. I love this sport. Sounds like something you could have written yourself in your prime, Ken Flo. What do you make of Cory Sandhagen ending Chito's winning streak at 4?
Man, what a beautiful caption. Yeah, when you have that feeling, whether you're a professional athlete, high school athlete or fighter, of course, you're in that flow, right? You're in that state of flow. And there's nothing better, especially when the pressure is on the line. I've had some terrible performances, but I've been lucky enough to have something similar to that. And man, it's a great thing. It seems like everything is just effortless. And it seemed like that was the case out there for Cory Sandhagen, who faced one of the most dangerous guys at 135 pounds in Marlon Chito Vera, a guy who is known for his finishing skills of walking you down and being dangerous every second of every fight. And he won every single round, really. There were a couple rounds that were closer than others, but Sandhagen made a big-time statement with that performance. I think the way that he was moving out there was the difference. By that, I mean his footwork. Chito has good footwork, but he doesn't have necessarily dynamic footwork. And I think that really was the difference out here. And when you have the ability to switch stances, which was something I didn't feel comfortable enough. I would do it in training, but I didn't feel comfortable enough to do it during a fight. Having the ability to fight from both stances is such a weapon, and we're seeing more and more of that at high level mixed martial arts. Be it Israel Adesanya, Volkanovski, it adds such an other layer and wrinkle to the game, which can be very confusing. And I don't think Marlon Chito Vera had Cory Sandhagen figured out until maybe the last 60 seconds of that fight. So I was blown away by Cory Sandhagen's performance.
So I wanted to ask you just briefly about basic guillotine defense, because certainly it seemed early on that Chito Vera was trying to jump on a guillotine. Ryan Hall, of course, whom you have cornered in the UFC, has been a huge asset to Cory Sandhagen over the last several years. He's gone east to 50-50. Ryan Hall was in his corner. That Chito knows his way around a guillotine, but just at a basic level, like what is Cory Sandhagen trying to do, and why was he seemingly in no danger whatsoever early on from that 1 or 1.5 submission attempts?
He's been putting in the work. He's been putting in the work, both, he said, with his elbows and with his grappling skill. Being humbled by Aljamain Sterling, I think, was a big wake-up call for him. He realized he really needed to step up his grappling game. And he started working with one of the smartest guys in the game, in Ryan Hall. Ryan Hall has been one of the best instructors for probably over a decade now. He's a brilliant dude who really knows how to look at grappling in a very different way than pretty much anyone out there. And people forget, everyone talks about, a lot of the guys who are doing leg locks now and all that stuff. To me, it's always seemed like Ryan Hall has been anywhere from 3 to 8 years ahead of everybody else, with the way that he thinks about the game, with the way that the techniques that he utilizes. And I think that work has really paid off. And Ryan, leading up to this fight, was singing Cory's praises and saying, man, he's been really putting in the work. His grappling has got so much better. And as a fighter, you always have to be looking at your performances, primarily at your weaknesses, at the mistakes that you make out there, and fixing them. And clearly, Cory Sandhagen has fixed a lot of those issues with grappling, because I think grappling was responsible for winning at least 2 of those rounds.
So we've had both of these athletes on the show. We've had Chito Vera on the show multiple times, and there's going to be some criticism, obviously, coming his way today just based upon this performance. And I don't quite understand as technically nor as deeply as you do why he didn't necessarily go for it until the 5th round. But I want to talk about rounds 1 and 2, and particularly the ground stuff. Gets back to the corner, and Jason Perillo's like, what's going on the ground? Like, you're not fighting, you're not grappling. He very much, to me, looked like he was just in training, fighting off of his back. I've never known Chito to be so inurgent on the ground.
Yeah, it was funny. Chito's good on the ground, man. He's a good Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. But, if you have the proper positioning and you know how to keep it, that is going to thwart anybody's attempt at attacking from that position. So I think Chito just didn't really know how to approach the superior positioning of Cory Sandhagen. Cory was keeping a little bit more conservative, was leaning on more on his ability to control and land short shots. And Chito just didn't have an answer for a long time. And, to get to your point about rounds 1 and 2, you see the disparity in strikes. It was 50 strikes for Sandhagen in round 1 to 9 strikes of Vera in round 1. Then 61 strikes for Sandhagen in round 2 to only 5 strikes, total strikes to Chito Vera. I don't know what it was. Now, we have seen Chito Vera in the past take a little bit to get warmed up. He definitely has that engine that takes a little bit to warm up. Then he figures you out. Then he takes you out. And Sandhagen did a great job of not really letting him into the fight and having those moments too much. And I think Sandhagen was able to build that lead. And I think he was throwing so many different looks and so many different stances at Chito Vera that I think it had Chito very, very confused. The more that you have to process as a fighter, as an athlete, the more it can slow you down. And I think it had that effect on Vera for sure.
Yeah, no, you put that well. So in terms of the wayward judges scorecard, he gave rounds 3, 4, and 5 to Marlon Chito Vera. And thank God the rightful winner won this fight, or the whole headline segment of this show would have been about the scorecards. I thought maybe you could give round 3 to Chito, but it really would seem to me that this judge was looking for good reasons to give Chito these rounds. I mean, a lot of people had this fight 5-0, and I don't know, man. Thank fucking God that, order was restored by the other 2 judges.
It's crazy. I was watching one of the lead-up videos. They had a feature on Sandhagen. ESPN had a feature on Sandhagen and Vera leading up to this fight. And Cory said it himself. He said, I have to be so good that I have to win clearly. I have to win each and every round in dominant fashion if I want to win a decision in the UFC. And he almost fell victim to this again. Now, you could argue some of those other decisions, whatever. But, I was just talking to one of my amateur fighters right now and told him the same thing. You have to be so damn good because in this sport, you never know what a judge is looking for. I thought that judge had it wrong. I do think there's a strong argument for Sandhagen winning all 5 rounds. After just watching it there, I thought he did win all 5 rounds. Some rounds closer than others. I agree with you there. And you can look at the numbers, and of course, the numbers don't always tell the story. Just because in round 3, Sandhagen landed 35 and Chito landed 19 doesn't necessarily mean that Sandhagen won that fight, because they're looking at the impact of those strikes, right? 3 jabs isn't the equivalent of 1 big cross that knocks your head back. So anyways, but yeah, it's crazy and a little scary. And we saw some other decisions that night, John, they're big time head scratchers. So yeah, the right guy won here. But to have it, and I love Chito, I'm a huge fan of his, but to have it, 3 rounds to 2 for Chito, just wasn't the whole story. And I'm sure Chito would probably say the same thing.
Cory Sandhagen, skill for skill, you can argue is the best bantamweight in the world. I mean, I think Aljamain Sterling is the best 135-pounder in the world. Certainly has that monumental head-to-head win in the series against Sandhagen. But Cory, I always think, has insight when he speaks, and talked about desire not necessarily being enough at the elite level, right? Eventually you run into somebody who wants it as badly as you do, and you don't have to be tougher than that guy. You got to be more skilled than that guy. And seemingly this dude is well-versed in all areas. Seems like people believed him to be undisputed champion type stuff from the minute really he started fighting in the UFC. And he's had some bumps, obviously, the Sterling fight, Petr Yan fight. But what are your thoughts now? Cory Sandhagen is the man moving on up at 35.
Sandhagen has made the right moves. He's training in the right way. I think he has clearly shown that he has made those improvements and wants to get back into the title picture. And also, talk about confidence as well. Who the heck is calling out the boogeyman, Merab Dvalishvili? He is one of the few guys who's asking for that fight. So I think he feels that might be a good fight for him. That is certainly a very tough fight for him. But the fact that he's calling out these really tough matchups shows that he feels he is ready for anyone in the division. And that's what the UFC wants to hear. And having tasted, been so close to being a champion of the UFC, I think he realizes that the time is now, and he's got to fight the best out there and prove himself as the very best. And I think he can do that. I really do.
And I think his show money has got to be getting pretty good. And here he's trying to obtain the most obtainable fight right now, right? Sean O'Malley is waiting in the wings for a championship opportunity. Aljamain Sterling's going to fight Henry Cejudo. Now, if Cejudo wins, all of a sudden that opens things up for Merab. Do we really think Henry Cejudo is going to turn around in 3 months and put the belt on the line against Dvalishvili? No. So you do a main event between Sandhagen and Dvalishvili. And just a smart call out by a very smart fighter, Cory Sandhagen, whom we congratulate on a huge effort. On the other side, Marlon Chito Vera. And I told him not to take this fight, right? Because I felt like he could wait, not unlike Sean O'Malley, whom, by the way, he has a head-to-head win over. But I thought Chito, as the most decorated finisher in this division's history, and with the 4-fight winning streak, didn't necessarily need to take this fight. Now it becomes less about taking the fight or not and the performance. And I mean, this guy's got to be top 10 in terms of like UFC fan appeal, right? I mean, this guy feels like he sold out this AT&T Center in San Antonio, Texas. What are your thoughts on Chito moving forward after, with respect, a relatively listless performance here in a big spot for him?
Yeah, listen, this is going to happen, especially if you keep a pretty busy training schedule and fight schedule in the calendar year. You can't have a perfect night every night, but that's the difference between, the great fighters and the champions. Even when they have maybe a not so hot night, you have to find a way to win. I think Chito's going to be back from this. I think he's going to look at this like he always does any of his losses and look for ways to improve. It was tough to say, was this a case of Sandhagen confusing him and throwing so much at him that was shutting him down? Or did Chito have an off night? I don't know. I mean, clearly Sandhagen looked like he was in that flow state, moving extremely well. But I think Chito needs to go back, make his footwork a little bit more dynamic, and get off to a faster start. This is something that has plagued Chito, and luckily, because Chito is such a potent striker and such a potent finisher, he has found a way to get it done. But we can go back to the Jose Aldo fight and some other fights where you see him taking a little bit to get going. Even the Dominic Cruz fight, he was losing that fight. Then, of course, found his rhythm, got that unbelievable knockout. So I think Chito will learn from this, as he always does. He'll be back better. Still one of the best bantamweights in the world. Still a huge name in the sport. Just accomplishing that alone is huge for this kid. I expect him to be back better, smarter, and more dangerous.
Cory Sandhagen outstruck Marlon Chito Vera 187-73. And yet one judge thought that Marlon Chito Vera won that fight. So in terms of Cory Sandhagen, Marlon Chito Vera real quickly has called out Petr Yan. Yan, of course, has lost 3 of 4, but that fight seemingly would make some sense.
I like that. I mean, geez, Yan, I mean, he's on this losing streak. He's facing all these row of killers. That's a very interesting fight. Way more pressure on Yan than there is on Chito. Sign me up. I mean, Fight Night, make that as Fight Night main event. That is fire right there. I like that.